Hello out there, this is Kay from TKM again, and I would like to share with you some of the treasures that I have in my bookshelf. I have been a reading teacher for a very long time, and I've always been curious about what other areas do. Visiting England one time, this one came into my possession. And it's got the same things that we write about over here. It talks about how it should be interesting, it should be the right print, it should have all the elements that a beginning reader has, and most importantly, it talks again about phonics, how we remember that we're going to give instructions that let them access the code of being able to do it. All right, another thing that we need to know is remember reading is one half of the coin because that's taking print out of text and learning what it says. What about if we want to put print down, if we want to send people a letter? This was another fellow that I encountered. His name is Dixon, and he's the one who wrote the corrective spelling series, but his initial book was A Surefire Way to Better Spelling. They seem to always name their material about what it does. This guy was terribly interesting. He chose to go to school, parents are both well educated, and figure out how we improve our spelling technique. And he decided that there were certain rules in English language, and so a few rules and you will be able to be a surefire better speller. Another thing that you're going to need if you're going to be an educator is to find out how well you're doing. How are your students doing? Are what you're trying to teach them getting across? This is another people that I met in my course of my studies. They were wonderful, and they have created a technique for assessment. This is not the thing that you take when you go out there and you do a standardized test. This is what's called curriculum-based assessment. It's a formative tool. That means you use it to form the basis of mastery teaching so that you know what you want to teach and make sure every part of that gets taught. After all, people, we would not want a pilot who only learned half of the instruments to fly the plane, and probably not a doctor who didn't know all the body parts. So it is a really good idea to teach the kids all the elements that are necessary to make our very effective language work. This was another lady I met. Her name was Marilyn Yeager Adams, and as you can see on the outside, it's called Beginning to Read. And this particular book doesn't have that cover on that, but you can look inside. Beginning to Read is telling you about thinking and language in print. And this gal did what's called a meta-analysis. Analysis is when you investigate something and see what it does and you lift it out. In a meta-analysis, you go to all the research that's ever been done on beginning reading, and you examine every single one of those research studies, and then you lift out all the parts that they share in common and provide a meta-analysis. And yes, once again, phonics. We need to teach the key to the code, everybody. Another fellow I actually got to meet, Mortimer Adler, very brilliant man who wrote a book on how to read a book. You'd think, really? But it turns out that all reading material has different styles. For example, a newspaper with its columns and different kind of reading is different than a chapter book who has more on the page. A comic book is another type of reading. A recipe is another type of reading. So if you're wanting to really fulfill your understanding and your talents as a reading instructor, this is another suggestion. These will all be on our bibliography. This is a fellow, Rudolph Fletch, who, this one, he was a brilliant man. This one's called How to Write, Speak, and Think Effectively, and it's a good course on communication. But he also wrote in the 60s, a long time ago, a book called Why Johnny Can't Read. And it was very simple. We quit teaching access to the print. Phonics were not being taught anymore because we replaced the primary reading teachers with people who taught literature, which is not beginning reading. Then a few years later, he wrote another book called Why Johnny Still Can't Read, because once again, we're still not doing the right things. So these are some of the ones that I wanted to share with you. And of course, the most important of all is this one, which is the theory of direct instruction, that everything else is based on, because this is, as far as I know, the only theory of instruction. The others are models, methods, ways. Montessori is a method that came out from Maria Montessori. Waldorf, same thing, that style. And of course there's various ways, but this particular book is how all the curriculum that I used for a very long time successfully was designed. The nice thing about using a design that's good is eventually, if you examine it long enough, you internalize that idea and you can reproduce it yourself. For example, you've been a baker your whole life. You've made all kinds of cakes. You know every cake requires certain things. And so one day you don't have the recipe book lying around, but you remember it has all these things. So you get all those things, you put it together, you have a cake. That's what I learned to do with this nice little foundational material, how to design material. So if you're interested in any of this, again, we're going to put information there, how you can contact us, and we will talk to you and see if we can help you get on the path to literacy. Thank you.